Hey guys, and welcome to How to Render Comics. I'm Ed Foychuk, and we're going to start off with talking about pencils. In particular, I want to talk to you about the pencils that I use. Okay, you know, I know that a lot of students are in a lot of different countries around the globe, so your access to pencils it might be limited or it might be vast. It really depends on where you're living. Most nations, though, you've got a bit of a how can I explain? A bit of a variety you could choose from, right? This is the Staedtler Mars Lumograph wooden pencils that I use. They're graphite, and what you can see here, going from bottom to top, is degree of softness. So at the bottom, we've got a very hard pencil, that's 6H, and it moves all the way up to a very familiar HB, and then all the way up to 8B, which is almost akin to charcoal, in my opinion. Like, it's very soft, right? Now, it depends on what you like to draw, like, or rather, how, right? Do you like light, quick sketches like this type of thing? Do you enjoy a little bit heavy-handed, like a little bit darker and stuff? Do you enjoy being able to go darker without having to press darker? Like, do you enjoy just laying it down and all of a sudden it's there, right? Like maybe you could just lay it on down. It's dark. It's already there, right? This is a stylistic choice to a certain degree. The only thing I would say is usually when we're sketching, light sketches, not blocking figures out, but light sketches, we start to work in this area, right? When you're starting to block things out, you're moving into this area and stuff. And this will make a little bit more sense as the course goes on. The easiest one is the HB. The HB is usually the standard that you'll find for schoolwork around the globe. Everybody's using HB, right? So most people are familiar with the HB, and I think if you're going to pick up any pencil, this is the easy one. You can see it's kind of halfway down and halfway up, right? So it's that nice middle road that I think is really good for what we're going to do. Of course, if you've got this whole spectrum going on, well, all the better, because it's going to give you a lot of choices, right? Okay, so let's move on. I've sketched out this really rough picture of the character Cable for our pencils practice here today, okay? Why don't we zoom in just a little bit here and you can see how ugly he is. Sorry, Josh Brolin. And we're going to work with pencils. We're going to work with, in this first section here, we're going to talk about line weight. So what does line weight mean? Well, we've got this rough sketch, right? And it's not really, I didn't focus on any line quality or anything like that. I just kind of sketched it out. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my pencil to kind of show where I would put maybe some heavier lines. Now, there's two theories of how to approach heavier lines, and they're not exclusive to each other, right? One is the shadow. Wherever the opposite of the light source is. So if the light source is coming here, you're going to have a heavier line under here, right? The second, when it comes to line weight, is proximity or close, how close it is to you, right? So something that's far away might be really light and thin. Something that's closer will have a darker outline to it, or some more details and darker, right? What we're going to work here is I'm going to sketch just a little bit, and I'm going to do that kind of number one, okay? I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to do this whole figure. I just want to show you some examples. So wherever I think, I'm going to go with an overhead light right now, right? Wherever I think that the light would hang, as in it would drop a bit of a shadow there, right? And so if it's overhead, well, it's going to be heavier on the bottom of this jaw and chin, right? And the line gets a little bit thinner as it comes up towards the light. Okay. You can see on the top of this, so this is a chin, right? Here's his chin. I could give him a little butt dimple, right? On the top of it, it's going to be kind of a thin line because the light's touching it. We want to thin it out. But under it is going to be a much thicker line as it comes around. And I could do this in the ear and the details here, right? Do it under here. So the top is a thinner line, but anything that's kind of hiding underneath, I could even hook it a little bit there, right? Gets to be thicker because you're imagining that it's kind of got a bit of a slight drop shadow to it. Okay, and I'll explain some of these terms as we go on here. Okay, so I'm doing this nasty little snarl, right? And you could see how anything that's heavy, that I don't think the light would necessarily hit very much. I'm going over it with a much heavier line, right? Okay. Anything that I think has a very light detail, I'll just kind of touch very lightly. You know, some of these wrinkles, Brolin's old, but not that old, right? I'm not going to do them really in depth. But some of these areas that I think, you know, the brow, for example, is going to have some weight to it, right? And that type of thing, right? Okay, so you can see what's happening here is anything that is maybe on the underside is going to have that darkness to it, right? And as it comes up, I'm going to thin it out. I'm going to have a nice light line up top, but I want to emphasize that it's dark down below here. Okay, so this, we're just talking about line weights here. We're not talking about fully shading yet or anything like that. Just why I'm choosing some of the line weights that I'm choosing. Okay, and now you can see what's happening here is I'm just kind of going over some parts to make sure I emphasize where that weight carries on the bottom of things, right? Maybe a little bit here, a little bit under that nose. You know, there's some weight there, right? Definitely the brows, right? And now if I was to back out, you can see how it's already showing that light source, right? You know, where's the light source? If we're looking at this picture, wow, you know, all of a sudden I can see this image compared to the sketch underneath it is really popping, right? It's popping because it's a darker line, yes, but it's also popping because I started to define the light source. Not fully, I didn't render it out fully or anything like that, right? But I started to, just a little bit, show the difference in line weight. Okay, so that's really important. To understand line weight, like I said, there's going to be two approaches to it and they're not exclusive. This one is shadow, meaning understanding where the light source is and giving a heavier weight underneath. The second one I talked to is proximity, how close something is to you. So I'm going to come over into something that's got some foreshortening here, right? And let's say I'm going to start to draw this, right? You know, I'm going to, I don't know, render it in, and I'm going to come in with a somewhat thin line back here, okay? Now, as I get closer, I'm going to start to thicken up that line a bit, right? And, you know, I don't know if you guys know, but he's got one metal arm, so I can, you know, I can do the bands if I want. And the bands will show that foreshortening as well, right? He's got him coming across here, for example, right? And like I said, as I'm starting to get to a part that's closer to me, I can darken things up and thicken them up to try to emphasize that it's getting closer, right? So maybe this one will be a little darker than the one behind. And you can see already, you know, I'm transitioning. I could do this, I'm working digitally, so I can bump my brush size a little bit. And now this gets a little bit easier here. And of course, you know, I'm going a little bit faster and less careful than I might be if I was to actually wanting to make this into a final drawing. But I want to show you guys just how this can end up. Still getting sketchy looking here. You know, sometimes when you're in the heat of it, when you're up close to something, you're not always able to see exactly how it looks. So especially when it comes to shading, and we're going to do it here, but I would always recommend taking a step back. Whether it's from the paper and you just look at it a bit more from a distance, or if you zoom out if you're working digitally, right? Okay, so we can see how the darker the line, it progresses light to dark as it gets closer to us, right? That's really important. And of course, remembering to add these details in, right? And as things get closer to, you can add more details. Like these are not just circumference lines, but they're actual, they've got maybe a divot to them or something like that, right? Yeah, you could tell definitely this is much, like the fist is much closer than that shoulder, right? So that's using that second approach to pencils for line weight, using the proximity, right? Another one, just, it's not really another one, but what you could do is kind of outline the plane. If this fist is on one plane, I can give it a bit of a harsher outline just overall around it. I don't like that knuckle. And then you can see how this is another plane. This is another plane. Here we go. This is another one. This is another one. And this is the last one, right? And so when I'm talking about planes, I'm talking about like kind of levels of the object towards us. There's this ball, the ball behind, the ball behind, and the ball behind, right? And so this ball is going to be heavily outlined. This one's going to be kind of outlined, this a little bit, and that's not at all, right? Okay, guys, this is line weight. And if you can get this down, this is a really simple way to render with pencils. It's not labor intensive. You can get it done pretty quick, as you can see, right? And like I just did this in, 10 minutes for us or whatever, or less. But it's a way that can really make items pop off the page. Okay, I hope that helped, guys. Have fun with it and have fun with your practicing. Okay, guys, we're back, and I've got a little exercise for you here. Something to do and something to learn. I want you to practice anywhere on any sheet of paper working on gradients. What's a gradient? Well, it's practicing tonal value. For example, from dark to lighter to lighter. Now, if you remember the pencils that we talked about, this could be easier with different types of pencils. Some of them carry really hard and are really hard to get a dark out of them. And the opposite, the soft ones are really hard to get something very light, right? So that's why I want you to practice with your pencil, is just do this again and again and again. You could start deep and dark, working on it, kind of lift up on the pressure just a little bit, lift up on it more, and nice and light so that it's barely touching that paper, okay? You can even do it the opposite way. Go really light, start to darken it up a bit, start to darken it up more, and start to really push into it and get that dark fill, right? To be honest, this is the practice everybody needs, right? It's a good exercise for everybody. Working on this tonal value gradient, it'll help you up your game. It'll help you get more dexterity and more skill when dealing with pencils and whatever you've got. And weirdly, if you're working traditionally, it'll help sharpen your pencils. So that's always a bonus. Something else I wanted to talk about is different approaches to shading, especially with a pencil. Okay, so we've got this gradient, right? So we've got this gradient. That's an ugly G. A gradient technique, right? Another one that we can do, and I've kind of been practicing here, is let's say I do the same type of gradient, but I'm going to kind of light it up there. You can take, I usually take my finger, but I get a little bit too oily. You can take a paper towel, or actually something called like a smudge pen or a smudge stick. And what you do is it just kind of blends it in. So you can take like a tip of a paper towel and kind of rub it on the paper or something if you're working traditionally. A lot of programs have this type of thing. So you can see how this becomes kind of all smudged in, right? And then you can even go in and add into it more, darken it up if after you've already smudged it, see if you can smudge it some more because you want it dark on that side, right? And you can work on your gradients going from really light to darker across the panel here, but smudged, okay? So we've got a nice, like a line gradient that's just laid down. We've got the same thing, but then we smudge it out, and so we could practice this nice blending, okay? Another one that could be done, and this is very similar to what we're doing here, is kind of a hatching. Now, hatching can be like individual lines. You could hear, maybe you can hear how my patterns change. I'm no longer dragging the pencil. I'm almost doing grass type thing. And so I'm doing individual lines, and as I want to get lighter, my lines become further apart. So as they're closer, or as they're darker, they're closer, obviously, and then it gets lighter as they start to spread until just a few lines, right? So this hatching, whether it's a defined feathered hatch like this, right? We'll practice this more in inking. With pencil, it doesn't work quite as well, right? But or whether it's just this kind of light grassy type of hatching, that's another way to start to shade with a pencil. Okay, and the last one I'm just going to go with is a pure fill. So let's say you've got this defined area. All you want to do is get in there without really going over the edges, and you can even outline it if you want it at different times, right? I used to do that when I was younger with a pencil crayon, do this nice little outline, and you're just shading whichever to your ability, trying to blend in, fill in, get that whole thing filled, whichever area, okay? So this part is really where you should spend a lot of time. You know, it's funny because I sat down and, I'm recording this for you, and 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, done. Seems simple, right? It's 5 minutes. I've gone over gradients, smudging, hatching, and fill. But the truth is, the practice of just this one alone is going to take you a long time to get comfortable with it. And every time you switch up pencils, different companies or different hardness or anything like that, you might have to practice a little bit more. So what I recommend is have some rough sheets of paper off to the side and get practicing with this, working those gradients, get comfortable with it and everything, right? Then, how do you like to smudge? Is it traditionally, are you going to use your oily finger? I do, but not everybody wants that, right? They don't want my DNA on their pictures. Practice the hatching and practice the filling. Because as we go on through this course, this type of skill is invaluable. Okay, guys, we're back. And we've got another unit here with how to render comics. This one, we're going to talk about plotting out shadows. Now, what does that really mean? Well, as we've talked about in the lighting unit and stuff, once we know that a light source is coming from a certain direction, right, we can see our object and then see, okay, well, the light source is here, so that means the shadow is going to be somewhere around here. Do you know what I mean? Like, that the light will hit here, but not so much down here, right? Depending, unless we get into more complex lighting like bounce light and all that. But for right now, let's keep it simple. So if I'm looking at this picture of cable here that I've already started to render just a little bit, right? And I want to have overhead lighting, well, how's it going to look? Where would that be? Where would I plot it? One nice and easy way to do that is to just say, okay, well, the light's coming here, right? And his chest is this kind of plane that's here. I could look at the pec here or whatever. And we know that it's going to come the shadow is going to be obviously on the underside here, but where's it going to come up top? Will it be up here? This is pretty tough. I know it'll probably be in here, and then maybe scoop somewhere down into there, right? So if I'm looking at how the light would fall here, the light's not really going to touch this part here so much. And I can get into more detail too, like the lighting would probably not touch right here, not touch here, not touch on this part here, not touch on this part of these little grenade things, right? Not touch here, maybe come something like that, right? That's where the lighting would not touch if it's coming from above. It can come something like this, right? But not only does it come in on this shape, but there's also this cast shadow, right? So this shape is going to cast a shadow onto this fabric below, right? Something like that. So if I'm going to shade, and this depends on how I want to shade, right? There's going to be a few different techniques in doing this, right? Actually, I can do it on here too. Just have a small little line underneath, and and then I even have a drop here below, right? Okay. I'm going to do something really cheap that you're not going to love. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to follow the adjacent line here, and I'm going to select this section here. So I'm going to select in here, and all I'm going to do is lightly shade. Okay. Now I'm using a bit of a hack because I'm on the computer that I'm selecting within my plotted area, right? Okay, I'm going to come out a little bit. Maybe angle it a little bit just so I can save on my wrist, right? Okay, so I'm kind of backed out, right? And all I'm doing is coloring this in. Not coloring, sorry, shading this in, right? Just with this nice scribble. I'm not going to blend it. I'm not going to do any hatching yet. I'm not going to do any variety of anything like that, right? I'm just going to come in here and blend it out. Okay, so you can see how I've now defined that that's where the light's going to drop on him, right? Like that's going to be the shadow underneath the chest, right? And I can come in, do the exact same thing in this section. If I want to, I can do it darker, right? Kind of plotting, I've already plotted in, so I'm going to fill it on in, right? Or I can do it lighter in this section, right? If I want. This is really kind of a stylistic choice a little bit. We've talked about blending, hatching, different ways to approach it. This is your choice, what you want to do. What's your style? Are you a blender? Are you a hatcher? Like that kind of thing, right? So you can see how we've got some variety happening here, right? One of the easiest ones to kind of plot out if I want to is, it's going to come down the neck because we've got this huge drop shadow from his head, right? It's going to drop over the neck. If I really want to, what I could do is kind of almost charcoal this thing, right? And just kind of blend it in that way, right? That's another way. Okay. So I'm kind of showing you guys a few different ways to kind of plot it out, right? Whether it's a hatching, whatever that might be for plotting out where that drop shadow goes, right? What you're going to find is, and we get into this in other units when it comes to texturing, when it comes to different materials, all that kind of stuff, right? That you're going to have a little bit of variety. And I'll go over it a little bit here in pencils, but really, whether you're choosing the hatch, whether you're choosing this charcoal kind of blend, whether you're choosing this blackout thing, however you choose it is your stylistic choice. What I'm showing you here in this unit is how to plot out where the shadow might go. Okay, so I've plotted this out, right? Here's where that drop shadow, or where the light might hit. It's coming across here, but then I might come up through there. It's underneath that part and underneath this part, right? And then it kind of comes in here, and so I would shade in there, right? But you know what? This is where I'm going to point something out to you, that this section here is fabric, right? It's this kind of superhero tights, whatever it is he's wearing, and that kind of stuff, right? When it comes to the arm, it's skin, and he's a white dude, right? So it's going to be very light skin, right? I've seen him depicted as almost a light pink sometimes, type of thing, right? So when we go over like something that might be dark black, or it's inside this X might be already kind of a darker color. Usually it's like a red X with a black background, right? And that's what I'm kind of going with on this theme right now. If I'm going to shade that in, well, heck, that sucker's going to be dark, 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 right? Like I'm gonna really give it that because that black is going to grab onto whatever shade I'm doing already and really punch it. And again, we go over this in the lighting unit, so this should be a little bit of a refresher for you, right? We've already talked about this already. Darker skin versus lighter skin, different materials and stuff like that, right? So if that's my shading on black, well, how am I going to shade on this pale skin of Cable, right? What I might do is just kind of come along this way, come in here, and come up this way. And that might be it. And then how do I shade it inside of it? Well, you know what? I might just do a light line like this. And that's it. That's all I might do on his skin. Okay, something simple like that, right? Like for the veins, I might drop a bit of a shadow on it, do a little bit of hatch, drop a bit of a shadow, do a little bit of a hatch, something like that, right? Like this is all it needs to be. Something along those lines, okay? So remember that when you're plotting out where the shadow's being dropped, you're recognizing that there might be some different reflective colors underneath, and that the shadow might not catch them, especially in pencils, the same way. So let's take a hypothetical, and let's say that this side of his suit is a dark blue, and the inside bands here are a light blue. If they're light blue, what I might actually do is, where's my eraser here? I would actually maybe take some of this away, because that light blue wouldn't catch the light or the shadow quite as much. Okay, so it might catch up here in this dark blue area more, right? But as soon as it crosses this band here, it's going to go into light blue, and it gets reduced by about 50% or something like that, right? So it went from this full coverage to dropping down, and the light kind of just doesn't catch that shade as much, okay? Okay, I hope this helped for when you're plotting out where to put the shadows and everything. What I would do is go through this whole character, and of course you're going to get this sheet without anything on him or anything like that, without all my goofy little sketches and everything, right? You're going to get this sheet without that and plot through where the lighting would drop. This is another exercise for you, right? Plot through if you're going to light from the side, whatever it is, and then try to figure out, how the underlying material might affect your plotting. Good luck, guys. Have fun with it. Hey guys, we're back, and I want to talk to you a little bit how you can do some more advanced techniques when it comes to rendering here with a pencil. I'll give you an example here. We've already plotted this shaded part out, right? But what if we've got to bounce from below? How are we going to handle that? I'm going to presume that this is just a solid shade, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come in kind of do this selection. And I'm cheating a little bit because it's a computer and because I'm trying to teach and this is a slight hurry, but you don't have to do this, right? Like you can take your time, plot this out and do it correctly or just more carefully, not even correctly, in the way that, whatever suits you, right? So let's say that I come in and I've darkened this area and I'm using a big ugly pencil, right? Okay. So now, I know that the light as it hits. Do you remember when we looked at the egg? And when the light hit, there was like a really dark part on it, and then it kind of gradient out, right? Because the bottom was hitting a bit of a bounce. The surrounding surface on whatever the surface was bouncing a little bit. So where it actually hit, the line between light and dark here was a little bit darker, and then it kind of just rounded out. That's what I want you to do for this peck, that, you can do it with a gradient, you can do it with a pencil, however you want to do it. But you can do it, for example, like this is a solid part. I'm kind of turning my paper around here. And then you can lighten it up as it goes down. So watch, it gets solid as it's up here, right? And we could do it with cross-hatching, you could do it with smudging. And as it comes to the bottom of the peck, and maybe draw that one little line from this fabric thing, right? So it's dark up here. And as it comes to the bottom of the peck, it kind of lightened up, right? And again, it's dark up here. And as it comes to the bottom of the peck, it lightened up, okay? And so that's another way to show a bounce, right? We've got the light coming from above, and of course it would be under all of here, right? Like this cast shadow from these objects and stuff like that, right? And there might be a little bit of a highlight over this little band thing or whatever, right? But then maybe there's some type of lighting coming up. Well, then we don't want it consistent like we've got on the right? This is kind of a little bit flat. This now gives it that extra blend, that extra bit of gradient. And remember, I told you, practice your gradients, right? If you want to, you can come in and start to blend it out, right? Like it depends on your style of rendering. Is this going to be kind of a more fine artsy type of thing? Is it going to be... Blending doesn't always work in print very well, right? But it can look pretty darn cool, right? It looks like you really took your time, right? And so you can tell that here, right, that there's a darker shadow all up in here that was cast from up here, from, this shoulder pad or whatever he's got here, right? The shoulder pad cast this dark shadow onto his pec, but there's something else impacting it down below, right? You can see that from here that, there's this hard cast shadow, but then there's this light. So the stylistic choice is yours. Do you want to hatch? Do you want to smudge? Do you want to speckle? I guess that's actually one more I can show you. Like, are you going to do just dots as a pattern to show, show that the density of it, right? The deeper density of the dots, the darker the shade is, and all that kind of stuff, right? These are stylistic choices, guys. What I'm showing you here is why you would choose to go in one direction or another for lighting, and then which one you choose for rendering. Have fun with it. Play with it. Guys, I hope that helped with understanding how to plot and then how to do some type of bounce once you have plotted it in, right? Good luck with it, guys. And keep practicing on Cable here. There's a lot of potential for a lot of cool lessons on him. Take all the ones you've learned so far and render out the whole thing, and then send it to me. I'd really like to see how you finish up with Cable. Have fun, guys.